once again be with Joel as he shares with the student body this afternoon. We pray this in your son's name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Hello, everybody. Like Mr. Temperley said, my name is Joel Veldkamp, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm Stella and Micah's older brother, and I graduated from DMCS in 2006, and I work for an organization called Christian Solidarity International, and I'm very happy to be with you here today to share about some of what I do. I kind of like to start off, though, by saying I hope you guys know how blessed you are to be able to be in a school like this, and I know you are because I was very blessed. It's just a very valuable thing that not many people have, to be able to go to school with all Christians and have Christian teachers and be able to challenge each other constantly to think about the world in the way that Jesus would want us to think about it. So I just encourage you to hold on to that and make the most of your time here in this great environment. Christian Solidarity International is a Christian human rights group, and we call ourselves CSI for short. And just for the record, we use that acronym way before the TV show. And we're committed to helping Christians and other oppressed religious groups survive under the threat of persecution. And right now our biggest project is in North and South Sudan, where an estimated 35,000 African Christians are trapped in slavery. They were captured and enslaved by Arab raiders during the Sudanese Civil War, and we have an underground network that works to try to bring them home. I've been working for CSI for a year now, and I've traveled to South Sudan 3 times to meet with people who are coming out of slavery through our network. They usually come back in groups of about 400 at a time, and when they come out, we ask them, is there anybody here who would like to share their story with us? And some of them do, and we listen to their stories, and we record them, and we want to share them with the world so that their suffering will not be forgotten. And to start off, I want to share with you the story of the first ex-slave I ever met. I don't think I'll ever forget this woman as long as I live. This is her. Okay. Her name was Nebul, and she was middle-aged. She was wearing a pink dress, and we were sitting in chairs together, plastic chairs, underneath a tamarind tree in the bush in South Sudan. And we asked her through a translator to tell us about her life. And she says, I've experienced so many terrible things, and I dream about them all the time, and I don't know how to stop dreaming about them. And we said, okay, well, what's the worst thing that ever happened to you? And she said that she was abducted and enslaved with her 3 young children. And her master, the man who had abducted them in the slave raid, told her that he wanted her to be his wife. But first, he said, I want to get rid of these children. They're black and they're dirty. I will give you new children, children I can control. And of course she said, no, I love my children and I won't be your wife. But one day, she returned from the well and found her 3 children dead, lying on the floor. They had been beaten to death. And Nebul lived in slavery, forced to be a sex slave to the man who killed her children for another 18 years before we were able to get her out. She had 3 more children with him, but they were all taken away from her, and she doesn't know where they are. And you can imagine that's the kind of story a 24-year-old kid like me doesn't forget very easily. And if you're like me, that story makes you feel all kinds of things at the same time. You feel sad and helpless and maybe really, really angry. So angry you don't even want to live on the planet anymore. You might feel like the woman Rachel in the book Jeremiah, who was so sad that she didn't even want to feel better again. Jeremiah says she was weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because her children are no more. But the good news is that God has given us a way to help people like Nebul. And to tell you how, I'm going to have to talk a little history, so buckle in. Last year, South Sudan split off from Sudan and became an independent country. It's the newest country in the world. But before that, Sudan was the largest country in Africa. It was almost as big as the US. And the northern half was nearly all Muslim and ruled by a group of Arab elites in the capital city, Khartoum. The southern half was all African and mostly Christian, although there are still some people who practice the traditional tribal religions. When Great Britain gave Sudan its independence in 1956, they decided to give the southern half to the Arabs in the north to rule over. And the southerners, African Christians, didn't want to be ruled by Arab Muslims, so they rebelled. And ever since then, there have been periods of war and periods of peace. But in 1983, the government tried to impose Islamic law throughout the whole country, north and south. And then a huge final rebellion broke out. And the government decided, you know what? It would be a heck of a lot easier to deal with this region if there were no Africans in it and no Christians in it. So they launched a war to turn the whole South Muslim and Arab. And one of the weapons they used in that war was slavery. The government would give money and weapons to Arab tribes in the north, and the tribes would raid Christian villages in the south. They would attack a village, burn it to the ground, kill all the men, take the men, the women, and the children, and the elderly people to the north, and enslave them. And besides having to work as slaves, often the boys would be forced to convert to Islam, and the women would be forced to marry Arab men and have their children. And the idea was that by robbing these people of their families, their home, their culture, and their religion, they could slowly turn the whole South Muslim and Arab. So during the war, in 1995, a long time ago, CSI went to South Sudan to speak to the people there and the church leaders there and try to find a way to help. And what we found was that some of the southern people were trying to buy back their relatives from slavery. They had connections with Arab Muslim traders in the north, and they would ask them to go search for their relatives and pretend to be slave traders, buy back their relatives, and secretly bring them home to the south to be free. And the slaves were valued so lowly by their masters that their freedom could be had for as little as $50 a person. And so the South Sudanese had started an effort to bring their relatives back from slavery. And the only problem was they didn't have enough money to buy everyone, and some people didn't have family left in the South. They were all dead, or they were gone, or fled the country. So when CSI discovered this network, we started raising money all across the US and Western Europe to buy these people out of slavery. We've been doing this for 17 years now, and we've helped tens of thousands of people come back from slavery this way. But even though the war is over, and South Sudan is an independent country, and the slave raids have stopped, tens of thousands of South Sudanese people are still held in slavery in the north, and we're determined to bring them all home. It usually costs about $50 to set a person free from slavery through our network, and all our support comes from churches and individuals. And there's some more stories I'd like to share with you today, and they're very hard to hear, but I think it's important for us to know what our brothers and sisters across the world go through and how we can help them. There we go. This girl I met in September, her name is also Nicole, and she thinks she's about 10 years old, but she doesn't know for sure. Her earliest memory is seeing her parents killed in front of her when she was 4 years old. Her parents were both slaves, and their master wanted to separate Nicole from them. They refused, so they were tied down and then killed. As a little girl, she was forced to take care of her master's cows and work in his fields. And thanks to CSI's network, Nicole is free today. She came home with her older cousin, and she tells us, "I'm very happy to be in the South, because everyone here is so nice." This man is named Malwal. I met him when he was freed last January, and you can tell he's a middle-aged man. But he was captured in 1989 when he was just 7 years old. And he told me that the soldiers came and grabbed him and took him away from his mother and shoved him into a train car filled with South Sudanese adults and children. And as the train moved forward towards the north, all the kids were crying and they wouldn't stop crying. And finally, the guards got so sick of the noise that they took two little kids and tied them up and threw them out the window of the train while it was moving. So that's one of his earliest memories. And I hope he's doing well, but it's a lot to deal with. That's me. And that's my friend Garam. He's 26, so just 2 years older than me. And he was captured and enslaved when he was 12 years old. And he told me that his master forced him to pray like a Muslim and sent him to a school to learn the Quran, the holy book of Islam. And the teachers there beat him if he didn't study the Quran well enough. And they would wash the holy words of the Quran off the chalkboard with water and then make him drink the water to ingest the Quran somehow. And when we talked, he told me that he doesn't want to be a Muslim anymore. A traveling pastor in the South had told him the story of Jesus, and he told me that he likes the Jesus story much better. He told me Jesus died for many people, not just for himself or for his own family. He belongs to the whole world, and he doesn't force people to follow him. This This boy is named Kier. His master deliberately blinded him and left him for dead when he was about 13, we think. And when we found him, we took him to the United States to have eye surgery, which restored some of his vision, but not all of it. And while he was here, he was able to share his story at a congressional hearing on Sudan last October. And today, one of our donors is sponsoring him to attend Perkins School for the Blind in Boston. And when I first met him in October, he didn't speak a word of English. Now he's fluent in English, and apparently that wasn't good enough for him, so he's moving on to Spanish. So, he's learned to read Braille, he plays the piano and the guitar, and he's studying advanced physics. So, that's cute. This woman is named Abouk. She was liberated with her baby, Ajong, in March 2009. But when she was liberated, she told our slave retriever that she had 2 older sons who had been taken away from her, and that she would only come back to South Sudan if we promised to search for them. So we did promise, and thanks be to God, the next year, our slave retriever found little Akur and little Garang, her 2 boys, and brought them back. So this is them reunited for the first time with my boss, Dr. John Eibner, in South Sudan. Many people who come back from slavery know people who are still trapped in the north, and they ask us, please find my husband, please find my daughter, please find my brother. And we're not going to stop until all the slaves are free home. Whenever I get really sad, I think of Abouk and her children who are together again. I think about Garang, who's found new life in Jesus after literally being tortured into Islam. I think about Kier, who's finally able to go to school and realize his amazing potential. They remind me that God doesn't stand idly by while the powers of darkness move in the world. In Jeremiah, when God sees Rachel weeping for her children, in the passage I read earlier, God says,
Joel, point here. Point at your computer.
Thank you. He says, restrain your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for your work will be rewarded, declares the Lord. They will return from the land of the enemy. So there is hope for your future, declares the Lord. Your children will return to their own land. That's a promise God makes to the Christians of South Sudan, and he intends to use us, you and me, to keep it. When I was growing up, when the subject of anti-Christian persecution came up in church or with friends, well-meaning, very wise people would usually quote verses like James 1:2. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. Or they'd quote Matthew 5:11. Blessed are you when people persecute you because of me. And those verses are true, of course. It is blessed to suffer for Jesus. But those verses aren't for us. Those verses are for people who are persecuted. We are not persecuted. In this country, here, we have the greatest concentration of Christianity, wealth, and political power in world history. And for us, God has a very different message. To us, God says, remember those in prison as if you were together with them in prison, and those who are mistreated as if you yourselves were. He says, therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. Guys, we have a lot of opportunity. To us, God says, from everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. That's what God is saying to us. I don't think I need to tell you guys how much God has blessed us here in the United States. The question is, what are we going to do about it? I want to drop some numbers on you. It costs us $50 to save a person from slavery. The slave masters are usually cattle herders, and we buy $50 worth of cattle vaccine, and then the masters are willing to let them go in exchange for that. It costs us $50 to give that person who's come out of slavery a survival kit containing a tarp, farming tools, a pot for boiling water, grain, other things like that. It costs us $60 to give a free person the gift of a female goat. Goats make milk and cheese, and you can sell those things in the marketplace and make money. And all they need is grass to eat, so it's a really wonderful gift for someone who has nothing in South Sudan. There's a lady with a goat who's just come out of slavery. This little boy is named Mao. He never knew his parents. He still doesn't know who they are, I think. He grew up being told that his master was his father. But this so-called father cut off Mao's pinky finger in a fit of rage after Mao refused to wash the dishes one day. Today, Mao is free and has been collectively adopted by a village in South Sudan. And let me tell you guys, I've never seen a transformation in a person so quick as I saw in Mao after we gave him his sack of hope and his goat. This is what he looked like when we first met him, and he told us his story. He was very quiet. He was very withdrawn into himself. He was crying a little bit. And that was him after he got his sack. I don't know if this is the thumbs up or like the hang loose. He was just overjoyed. And you can imagine owning nothing, and in fact being owned by somebody else, and going from that to having this huge bag of stuff all to yourself. And I would be so proud to be able to tell people that the school I grew up in, or the school that helped teach me how to be a Christian, had become God's agent of liberation for my brothers and sisters in Sudan. I would love to talk about how many people my school and my friends had rescued from slavery. How many people do you guys think we can give new life this year if we work together? And there's more that we can do and that we need to do. Besides working in Sudan, CSI is trying to help Christians in Egypt, where churches are being bombed, mobs are driving Christians out of their homes, and young Christian girls are being kidnapped and forced into marriages with Muslim men, all while the Egyptian government stands by or sometimes actively participates in the violence. We're working to provide aid to Christian refugees in Iraq, where as many as 1 million Christians have been forced to flee the country by Islamic terrorists, and where most of the remainder have had to flee from the cities to the cold northern parts of Iraq, where it's safer. We're sending aid to Christians in Syria, where anti-government rebels are attacking Christian neighborhoods and forcing them to flee. These are some of the oldest Christian communities in the world. St. Mark, the author of Mark the Gospel, founded the Egyptian church. James probably founded the Iraqi church, and we all know Paul came to the Lord on the road to Damascus in Syria. They've been there for 2,000 years, and now they're in danger. Our government is sending billions of dollars in military aid to countries where these things are happening. We don't have to accept that. We shouldn't accept that. If God is testing our brothers and sisters in the Middle East with persecution, He is also testing us. What are we going to do with the money and the freedom He's given to us? And these are some Iraqi girls who gave warm winter coats to help them get through the winter. Okay. At our website, csi.usa.org, you can donate to liberate people from slavery in Sudan. You can also sign our petition to President Obama, asking him to stand up for the Christians of the Middle East. If you want to buy goats as gifts for freed slaves, you can go to a website some of our friends started. It's called goatsfortheoldgoat.com. And as an explanation, the website was started by a great lady who loves South Sudan and loves goats and calls herself the old goat. So, and what she does is, if you buy a goat through that website, when she goes to South Sudan to give it to a freed slave, she'll take a picture of the person who gets it and then send it to you. How cool would it be to line the walls of DMCS with pictures of people who have gotten goats from us here? So that's what I know, and that's what I have to say. Thank you very much for listening, and God bless you guys.